So welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a little smoother start to the beginning of your school year than I am. We live in Rose Park, so we have all but been blown away at this point over here in my neighborhood, but my boys were finally able to start yesterday. So here we go. This morning's agenda, if it will cooperate. Let's see, there we go. Okay. As you know, I'm Amanda Charlesworth, Program Specialist at the State Board. We're going to have Julia Armstrong present the mindfulness moment this morning, and she's our newer Youth and Care Educational Specialist at the State Board. Then I'll do some quick introductions of the staff from the Safe and Healthy Schools team. And then we'll come back to Nick and I to discuss the updates and changes to the mentor data collection process. So with that, let's move on over to not quite yet, Miss Julia. I put this in here to remind myself. I sent out an email to all the YIC directors Friday morning, letting them know that Granite is hosting a 2-day mentor training. And it's looking like right now this might be the only in-person training. So if you've got mentors that are new this year or would like a refresher, registration is open, but due to social distancing, we will have to limit that to 15 participants, and that would just be on a first-come, first-served basis. And as you can see, to register, you just need to send me an email with their information, and then I'll get that confirmed for them and give some additional details for the training. All right, let me get these folks admitted. There we go. Okay, so it looks like everybody should be in from the waiting room. So again, thank you for joining me this morning. You're always welcome to contact me afterward if you have any questions, and then specifically about the upcoming training, because that is this week. So we will have to close registration tomorrow afternoon just to make sure we have all of the materials prepared. Okay, so now I believe I'm ready for Miss Julia. So Julia, if you want to unmute your mic or however you want to get going, let's do the mindfulness.
All right, you can hear me okay? I unmuted.
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for letting me be part of this today. I am excited to be part of this team. And so those that you that don't know me, I'm Julia Armstrong. I work directly with Nick and Amanda at the Utah State Board of Education. Prior to this, I was with DCFS and the Office of Quality and Design. I worked 4 years out of Tooele with Kelly Russell. So this is near and dear to my heart. I love the Check and Connect program. Regarding mindfulness, for those of you that aren't aware, I'm sure mindfulness is a hot topic and also a word that is popular, right? Because I think that it truly is a helpful thing. So mindfulness, the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something, whether that's taking a minute to be aware of your feelings or your thoughts or how your body's reacting to certain situations. Mindfulness is a broad spectrum, and you can really tailor mindfulness to really meet your specific needs. So what I did today to be prepared for this quick 5 minutes is I thought about the moments where I've been able to share mindfulness, and I know that I have preached a lot without practicing. Things like, one of the really great things that you can do as for mindfulness is meditation or playing music, closing your eyes, breathing deeply, those kinds of things. And I had actually trained some of those things, but they're not really things that I did. And so I wanted to give you 3 quick things that I do to practice mindfulness for myself and then share with others. Because when you practice something, it gives you context to actually help it make a difference in someone else's life. So these are 3 quick things, and they're things that you can do today, starting when we hang up or even in the middle of this if you feel like you need to. The first thing is start your day intentional. And this can look a lot of different ways. When I was working with DCFS, it was a very stressful job and every day was new. And I would wake up a little bit anxious to accomplish some of the things that I needed to. And so what I did is I took great I took advantage of my commute every morning, and I spent my commute every morning thinking about the things I was anxious about, trying to prepare for those things ahead of time. And then if I got to work and I was still a little bit anxious, I would sit, I would breathe, and I would continue to work that out in my head before I entered the building. And that was really helpful for me. And it was something that I was able to help my staff do too. And it was interesting to see how often people were just sitting in their car before they came up to the building, because it really did help to create a space for yourself once you enter that building to be present and available and ready to do the things that you need to do. Another thing that I thought about that I do often in my home, and actually this started in college before I was aware of the word mindfulness, is just the idea of sharing your gratitudes or thinking of things that make you happy. And this isn't necessarily an activity that, like if you're stressed will bring you out of that, or if you're anxious will bring you out of that. It's something that you can do all the time, and it kind of focuses your brain into maybe a more positive or aware state of being for the things that are good in your life. So when I was in college, things, get stressful. And one day I decided I was actually eating a grapefruit with a friend who brought me a grapefruit from Sacramento, California. And it was the most delicious grapefruit I had ever had. And it made me really happy. And I wanted to share this happiness with others. And so I made a piece of paper and I wrote on it things that make me happy. And I wrote the most delicious Sacramento grapefruit. And what that did is it helped other people want to add to my collection of things that make me happy. And they came in and wrote on that piece of paper things that made them happy. And we had people that would come and visit. In college, things are fun. We had lots of people in and out of the house, and people would bring pictures of things that made them happy. And by the end of that school year, we had a full wall collage of things that made you happy. And people actually went out of their way to come to our house to put something on that wall that made them happy. And I think this is great because they were mindful throughout the day, throughout their week, of things that made them happy, and it made them very positive. And I think this is something you could easily do with your students. You can have that in your office. If you have an office, you can have a piece of paper. You can have one that's just individual to each student. And so I think that that's a really great method for mindfulness and to create a sense of positivity for your students. The last thing that I just want to talk about really quick is, especially in those moments that things are a little crazy, maybe you're a little bit anxious, taking a walk is a really great place to breathe. So just getting out of whatever situation you're in, take a walk. And I do this all the time. I've even done this for work, put headphones on, take a walk. And two, this has been really helpful for my son as we've been doing homeschool. It's really crazy and it's really difficult, and my kids don't like to learn from me, and we trigger each other and we become anxious. And so the thing that we've been able to do is take a walk together. And my son will get really emotional and he doesn't want to go outside and walk around where people can see him. So we just go in the backyard, we walk back and forth. And then once he's calm, once I'm calm, then we do some of those great mindfulness activities, such as being aware of your surroundings. And so I'll say to him, name 3 things that you see, and he'll name 3 things that he sees. Name 3 things that you feel, and he'll name 3 things, grass, wind, whatever. Name 3 things you smell. Name 3 things you hear. And that really brings us from this crazy tension thing. The walking helps us calm a little bit. The breathing helps us calm. And then when we can start talking about the things that we see, feel, hear, it really then moves us into that direction where we can then start again. And so these are just 3 quick things. I hope it's helpful for you. And I hope that it's a great year for you, and these are things you can kickstart today. So thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Julia. That gave me time to get a few more of my ducks in a row here and help me calm down. So thank you so much. I hope that's something all the mentors will find useful with their kiddos as well. Okay, so moving right along, let's do the introductions of our next group. We'll have 3 different presenters, and unfortunately, I don't know that I matched up the order they're going in with the way I put their bios in, but we'll just wing it as usual. So Scott Eyre is working with the Board of Education as well as the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. He's a school-based mental health specialist, and he's acting as a liaison between the two organizations. He's part of the School Safety Center leadership team, which works to identify evidence-based approaches that increase the physical and psychological safety of students to improve overall school climate. Scott has a passion for working with youth and spent the first decade of his career at Provo Canyon School, where he helped to develop early adolescent and elementary programs. In 2016, he began his employment with the state of Utah, where he spent 3 years with the Juvenile Justice Services before transferring to his current position. Hang on one second, let me get some folks out of the waiting room. There we go. Okay. Scott holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from UVU and is currently in pursuit of completing his master's in social work at the University of Utah. In his free time, he enjoys being outdoors, coaching his son's sports teams, building and testing paddle boards, and surviving the occasional ultra marathon in the desert. Scott, you sound like you are definitely outside as much as you can be. Okay, and then we will also hear from Jerri Sagers. Jerri works at the State Board of Education as well on the Safe and Healthy Schools team as a school counseling educational specialist. Before she joined USBE, she worked at the Tooele County School District as a school counseling program specialist, principal, vice principal, district behavioral specialist, elementary school counselor, and a secretary for both the school counseling department and Tooele High School. Jerri holds a BA in psychology, an MED in educational counseling, and has an administrative endorsement. And from my years in licensing, congrats, Jerri, that is quite a license. Jerri says, what has driven her in education field has been the desire to be an advocate for students in whatever capacity that might be. She believes that all of us have a story that defines us. She also says, I lived out in the country most of my adult life. Although it took many years to embrace it, you can call her a country girl and she would love it. Also presenting this morning will be Sergeant Jeremy Barnes. Jeremy is a school safety liaison for the School Safety Center, our office, the State Board, and the Department of Public Safety. He's been previously employed as an investigator with the Utah Peace Officer Standards and Training, with the Utah Department of Public Safety. He also worked with the Draper City Police Department from May of 2009 to 16 as a patrol officer, DARE officer in juvenile crimes, as a school resource officer at Corner Canyon High School. So he's very versed with our students, or with students in general, sorry. He holds a BS in Emergency Services Management, and Jeremy is a Navy Reserve member and enjoys spending his free time with his family. Okay, so with that, I would like to turn the time and screen over to Jerri. So let me stop sharing here. And you're welcome to unmute and start sharing when you're ready.
Okay, hi. And I will get my screen up. The only thing I'm worried about is on Google Slides, I was experimenting, and I'm not quite sure, besides going onto the menu down below and clicking on each screen, how I advance. It shows to play, but so if anybody knows how to do that with just using an arrow or something, that would be helpful. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And with that, I'm going to take off my, I was going to try and take off my, let's see if it'll let me. I just don't want my computer to go crazy. So I was going to try and take off my video with that, but it's not showing. So we'll go with this. Can you see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen.
I can see it. Okay, good.
All right, so I'm just going to kind of talk about, so in Safe and Healthy Schools, we have a lot of people that are in our team. There's like 10 of us, and we all work together to try and do what's best in schools, which you guys are too. And student services, it's really important that we're all communicating together. And I think Scott and Jeremy are going to talk more about multidisciplinary team, but school counselors, social workers, and the SROs are all part of this multidisciplinary team where we all work together for our students. And this is a great time to talk to youth in custody so that we all are communicating and you guys know what our specific duties, what we're trying to accomplish in the school, and how we can more align our work for these students. So, okay, so as you can see, this is the only way I know to. So we're going to ask you some questions, and at the end of our presentation, we want to come back and talk about this. So if you can write this down or think about these, we want you to have in your mind how we can work together and to answer these questions at the end of our presentation. So we're going to ask you how you think this can work. So the questions are that we want you to think about during our presentation are, what is a multidisciplinary team? Which I did mention that a little bit. How do student service providers address the whole child? How can we partner with you more effectively? And if you wanted us to take a message back to the field, what would you want us to convey to them? I'm going to move my camera up just a bit. Okay. So be thinking about that and we'll discuss it at the end of our presentation. Okay, so I'm talking about school counselors right now at USBE. This is my current responsibilities are to work with school counselors throughout the state. And I love working with school counselors. That is my love. That's why I've come to the state to work with them. It's just been great to have that relationship with them again. So, so a school counseling is a comprehensive program where and I'm going to go into, it is preventative in design and promotes the whole child. So a school counselor is a tier 1, and I'll get into more of how our service delivery works, but the biggest place that we want to work that we can make the most difference for all students in every school is to do tier 1. We do interventions that apply to the whole school, all students within the school. And that's where we try and spend most of our time, is in working with the entire school. So we have mindsets in our program model. We have mindsets and competencies. And this is the framework that we build around everything within a program in a school. And so, and it's interesting because social emotional is such a big part of our work right now, social emotional learning. Everyone is embedding social emotional learning into everything that they do in the school. But mindsets and competencies with schools with counselors have been around forever. It's nothing new. And we align with what's called the ASCA model also, which is the American School Counselor Association. And we work with them and we're right in line with this association. So there's 4 mindsets and competencies that we frame everything around with what we do. So there's academic and learning development, life and career development, multicultural and global citizenship development, and social and emotional development. Now, with curriculum and everything that everyone is teaching, they're pretty much aligning it with CASEL's 5 core competencies. And I'm going to read those to you. And as I do, I want you to look at these 4 mindsets and competencies and see if they align and where they fit in. So one of the core competencies is self-awareness. Can you see where self-awareness would fit into those 4 into those mindsets and competencies? Then there's self-management. Can you see how those would fit in? Relationship skills. Responsible decision-making. and social awareness. So as you can see, all of the 5 core competencies that are being taught throughout schools, through all of their SEL curriculum, line up exactly with the 4 mindsets and competencies in a school counseling program. Okay, so we have a service delivery. 85% of our time is supposed to be in direct services with students. So I'm going to go into that more in detail. So secondary schools has what's called the Plan for College and Career Readiness process. And I shouldn't say secondary. We focus on secondary because they do that plan where they meet with every student, 7 through 12, and they work with students with their goals, their classes, how they can align, what they want to be when they grow up, and they do that with their parents, and they come up with a plan for what classes they need to take in order to achieve their goals. They look at inventories to see where their interests lie. They take career exploration activities. They do all these things to try and think of how they can align their classes to align with what they want to be when they leave school, to be college and career ready when they leave school. And this is a huge part of what counselors do. But I want to tell you, yes, they meet one-on-one with secondary students, 7 through 12, but I don't know if you knew that this process goes on in elementary too. They are doing activities in their schools that help students be do exploration. They do virtual tours of colleges. They do career fairs, or that marketplace that they do. They're doing all kinds of activities to start younger elementary students thinking about what there is in their future, and to get them excited for their education and how they can see that become reality. And so our Plan for College and Career Readiness process is K-12, even though it's the one-on-one is 7 through 12. So I hope that that makes sense. Okay, another big part of our time, that 85% of that time, is part of a collaborative classroom instruction. So counselors are in the classroom doing presentations constantly. And that's where elementary and secondary kind of shift their focus, is that elementary counselors are in classrooms more doing presentations with the SEL lessons, and looking at what classrooms need based on the troubles that they're having in classrooms, particularly like with bullying, and then they also do groups. But collaborative classroom instruction is such a big part of the counselors, and how it works is there is a curriculum delivery survey that is a big part of what the counselors deliver, and teachers align. They take this survey and they show what they teach during the year that aligns with those mindsets and competencies. And then if they find holes within the school, then that's where the counselor goes in and let's say with the one of those areas that they're not teaching at that time. So then like the global part, the multicultural global, then the counselor would go in and make sure that those kids are getting, those students are getting that part of their education that they need, along with those mindsets and competencies. So teachers and counselors are working together all the time to make sure that the students are getting the subjects that they need to be well-rounded, to address the whole child, to help them to move forward within to make sure that they're college and career ready by the end of their education. So it starts of course, in elementary, and it moves all the way up through secondary, where they're all working together and making sure that the students are getting the education and that all of these mindsets and competencies are fulfilled. So I just wanted to give you just a little bit of information on what data is showing us with how important counseling is in the schools. And so you can probably read that, but it's just that school counseling should not be an extra. Everyone should have an opportunity to have a school counselor in their school and have that resource. So just at the end, it says, research indicates regular access to a school counselor is a necessity, particularly for students most in need of intervention and support. And that's another thing I didn't touch on, is that in every school, they do a systemic assessment. And that is where counselors look at where do our students need help. They give that to students, to parents, and to teachers. And then from that assessment, that's how counselors align their program. They take the feedback and look at, is there a group that needs extra help? Is there some group that is not achieving as much as we would hope? And they look at the gaps from their data, and that is how they plan their program. And so it's really important that students have access to counselors. And I'm so thrilled that we have had the opportunity to have funding. And HB 373, a lot of counselors are being hired and social workers in schools so that we can give this extra time. So also school counseling across the K-12 pipeline. We would imagine that the school system in which every student graduates ready for college and career. In the system, all students want to succeed and they have the tools they need to achieve now and in the future. And I really didn't touch on, I wanted to kind of focus on school-wide and tier 1, but I have to say that counselors also are working in dropout prevention with social and emotional supports. And that's where we're addressing the immediate needs of all students through an education-oriented and programmatic approach. So when students are struggling, they need help. We need to do small groups. We need to do one-on-one with the students that are really struggling. And counselors, that's a big part of that 85% also, where we're doing direct services for the students that need the tier 2 and the tier 3 resources. And counselors are a big part of that. And they also collaborate with existing school programs and coordination with family, school, and community. And as we're talking about the rest of student services, of course, they collaborate with social workers, the SROs, and then they also help in referring out to any wraparound services that they feel that students need to go above and beyond what the school counselor can provide. Okay, so this is Scott's turn. So I'm going to turn the time over to him. And I'm thrilled to be doing this presentation with Scott and Jeremy. We meet weekly in our staff meetings, but especially since we've been not had our office open, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to collaborate. And so this has been great, where we've been able to plan this presentation and work together. And so now I'm going to turn the time over to Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Jerri. I'll take it from here. I think you're driving it though, so I'll just let you know.
Okay.
What Jerri's talking about in regard to multidisciplinary teaming is something that we're trying to really model at the Utah State Board of Education. So I work for the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, and within that role, I do spend a lot of time working over with the folks at USBE. And we've been able to see a lot of really good work that's been taking place just by bringing different perspectives together, different ideas, and along with that sometimes comes different language even that we speak. And so how we work together really matters. Or after Julie started us with some mindfulness, maybe I should say we need to be mindful about how we work together and how that work takes place, because ultimately it has the impact is ultimately with the youth that we serve, whether those are tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 students. It is important to recognize that that our work together is important. And thankfully, we're starting to see school social workers being utilized more throughout the state. Now, the different LEAs that you work with may utilize social workers differently. Every school kind of has their own approach to that, whether or not social workers work at a district level or whether they're embedded within school communities. So that's something that I think that's important for each of us to know is who are the folks that work in our schools, but what are their roles? And I'd like to kind of speak about some of those times that you should think about including a social worker. So go ahead, Jerri. One time that we need to really be thinking about social work is specifically when we start talking about youth in custody. Oh, I'm sorry, Jerri. I think there was a couple bullet points that were going to come up on that, but that's okay. You can go back to that last slide. Moments when we need to include social workers include moments of transition. So this is anytime students are coming in and out of school, and oftentimes with students in custody, those times are in the middle of the school year. We have to recognize that these are really volatile times, and we need to look for as many supports as we can. So during those times of transition and change. Also, anytime there's changes in trajectory, and I think for good or for bad, when we start talking about the youth that we need to surround ourselves, the most supports surround them with, we're talking about dynamic children here who have good days and bad days, and having those positive touches are just as important as the supports that we can give them during the times that they're struggling. And school social workers are there to offer those supports and be a part of that. Also, school social workers, we have skills. There's a lot of things that we can offer in regard to groups and targeted one-on-one skill building that can be helpful. Times of crisis. During times of crisis, which tends to happen quite a bit with our youth in custody, whether that's a perceived momentary small crisis or whether these are big events that are happening in their lives. School social workers are specially trained to offer those supports and to be a part of that process. Go ahead, Jerri. Also, one other thing to think about is in school supports, when we start thinking about the things that are needed while youth are transitioning back into school, oftentimes we need to talk about check-in or check-outs or other kinds of touches that we can help support with. A school social worker would be a great person to reach out to if that's somebody that you're looking to find a positive adult in the school community that youth can reach out to and check in and out with. So I wanted to speak really quickly on ACEs, on adverse childhood experiences. And this isn't new information, hopefully, to most of you. I think if you've been in the field long enough, we have been able to understand better today what adverse childhood experiences do to impact youth's trajectory, specifically abuse, neglect, and different household dysfunctions that can work against a child. Events that take place or even just exposure to toxic environments can ultimately alter their course. And it's largely a lot of the time one of the contributing factors of why these kids even come into the system and are in custody in general. When ACEs take place, one thing that's important is it matters when these take place, not just that they take place, but what stage of development did they take place in. And when we understand that, we can understand how missing pieces, maybe if you think about it as stairs, how there's missing stairs, and in order to really continue building, we have to look at those pieces that may have been lost. And while it doesn't excuse behavior, it does give us an understanding of why behavior may be taking place and some of the things that we can do, or at least keep in mind and be mindful of as we work towards helping the youth that we serve. Go ahead, Jerri. I want to speak to some of the work that Dr. Keurig has done up at the University of Utah. And this was about a decade ago when she really dove into this, and she talked a lot about the trauma exposure among detained youth in Utah. So she did a study where she was able to look at this, those kids that were in JJS custody or other custody in the state, and really get an idea as far as ACEs, what those ACEs scores look like. And I apologize for the slide. It's kind of hard to read and grainy, but this was the best graphic that I could pull. But you can kind of see some of the trends in some of the violence and some of the abuse and other things that our kids have experienced. And specific to girls who tend to experience more of a sexual violence and domestic violence versus boys who are more of community violence and that way. But it's high among our youth. The point is that youth in custody have high ACEs, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. If you've worked with these youth for long enough, you know that they come from experiences that have really shaped who they are. One thing that I want to talk about, though, is this idea that when youth come into custody, their scores, their ACEs scores, don't improve or stabilize. In fact, very often they get worse. Coming into custody itself can be a traumatic event and be traumatic in nature. Again, depending on timing and other things, can impact others in different ways. So it's important to recognize. Go ahead, Jerri. And I'll say that social workers are uniquely trained to help support in those times. But that said, there's a different kind of ACE. And if you've been paying attention to the research, we're talking a lot about resiliency lately. And excuse me, advantageous childhood experiences is a different kind of ACE. It's an ACE that may be even a better predictor of outcomes. Go ahead, Jerri, one more. I want to talk about a study out of BYU. They did a study on counter ACEs, and they used these 10 questions in order to get an idea, a picture of some of the supports and the protective factors that are in a child's life. And what they were able to find out is that high counter ACE scores were better predictors of future success than ACEs alone. ACEs alone without counter ACEs had negative consequences. However, even with high ACE scores, we are learning that counter ACE scores or resiliency can offset these things. And I want to specifically draw your attention to item number 1 and item number 7 on that list, as that speaks directly to some, excuse me, some of the work that we're doing. Think about it. How are these 2 questions answered by youth in custody that you serve? Do they have these supports? Are those supports there? And to what extent might this be our responsibility as professionals in their lives to help shore up some of these supports? Also, with attention to number 4 and 5, speaking directly to what happens in schools. Experience in school is important, and is a very important piece at this stage in their lives. And how we can work together and better support these times of life is very important. Again, speaking back to that multidisciplinary team and how we can approach this from several angles. I actually really appreciate that Jerri brings up social emotional learning. I look at that as the foundational pieces for childhood or for a child's academic success. So we know that academic success in school is important, but without really being mindful of the social emotional pieces that need to be in place for real academic learning to take place, we know how important and foundational that is. And where social workers and school counselors overlap is that social emotional piece in schools. Go ahead, Jerri, one more. So within schools, again, what some of the roles that you'll see social workers using is to promote that social and emotional piece. Now, I want you to think about a Venn diagram, and hopefully I can describe this in a way that makes sense. But we should never get into the habit where we're handing off responsibilities in a way where this is where my job ends and this is where your job begins. Instead, we need to think about that in terms of a Venn diagram where we overlap those services or overlap those pieces in order to make sure that we don't have gaps. And this piece of supporting and promoting SEL on a tier 1 and tier 2 level is something that social workers in schools across the state are doing. Now, they do tend to lean towards some of the more tier 2 and tier 3 pieces as a primary focus in their job. However, they still are engaged in that support of SEL. Go ahead, Jerri. Help to provide and connect with mental health supports. Most of your school social workers are licensed, trained mental health professionals and can either provide some level of support or connect that youth to that support, offer, and even as a supplemental to many of these youth who already have primary care therapists. Go ahead, Jerri. Many LEAs are actively screening and assessing nowadays. This is another key thing that can happen. And so it's important to know who is in your schools and what screening and assessment may be able to be accessible. One more, Jerri. Skill building. We run groups, and most social workers across the state that are involved in elementary, middle school, or high school are holding after school groups or during school groups where small groups come together and are targeted with targeted interventions. One more, Jerri. Collaboration is going to be a huge piece to this. We are a member of a multidisciplinary team, and I'm going to turn the time over to Jeremy in a minute here, who is a SRO, a police officer, and law enforcement is a huge part of what we do. We know our youth in custody have had touches with law enforcement, and some not positive. But bringing an SRO into the discussion to help to support the youth from a positive angle rather than just these negative angles is really important. And that's part of what a social worker will do, is making sure that those transitions and those pieces are in place. Next, Jerri. Go ahead, you can go one more. So advocating for system changes and improvements actively in schools and within society. We focus on the social determinants of health and mental health, and that includes what's happening at home with the family as well. One more, Jerri. We also connect to community resources. That's one thing that is pretty specific within the role of social workers, is for us to not only support that youth while they're at school, but to assure that the needs of that youth are being met outside of school within the community. And eventually to be able to, again, pass that off to the family themselves, to other community members, to the youth, in a way that those supports are built intrinsically, and we can then step back and kind of work from the peripheral. But I just wanted to spend that time really defining not only what a school social worker is, but giving you some key takeaways on the importance of working together. I'm excited to learn at the end of this what feedback we get to see what ways we can invite the folks that work with youth in custody more to the table, because I think there's a big piece that we're missing from you, and so we're excited for that feedback. But also just to remember that just because that youth is in custody, and just because they've had a history of often terrible experiences, no fault of their own sometimes, that we still have cards that we can play. There are still things that we can actively do to help improve their situations. And as adults, being positive role models in their lives and being accessible and working in ways that sometimes isn't easy with youth in custody, who constantly push limits and at times are difficult to work with. We have to remember that it is our job to be professional and support them, and to hold them accountable, and to do that in a kind and loving way that ultimately builds that support from again the professional lens, and again to look for ways to connect to your social workers. If you don't know who's your social worker in your districts or in your schools, I strongly urge you guys to go out and find out and collaborate with them. With that, Jeremy, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Again, I'm Sergeant Jerri Barnes. I'm the school safety liaison with the Utah School Safety Center at the Board of Education. Prior to this, I came over to this position in February, just before COVID shut things down. Prior to that, I was I was investigating officer misconduct at Utah Peace Officer Standards and Training, as well as teaching at the academy. And I give that because through COVID, I've continued to teach at the Law Enforcement Academy, and we've done a lot of training over these webinar-based systems. As I go through this, if you all have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I will monitor that. And so if you have questions that pop up, I will answer those questions before I leave the slide. And as Scott brought up, SROs are a critical member of not only the school community, but also when we start having those discussions regarding the multidisciplinary teams. The multidisciplinary team, everybody at that table has a different level of expertise, a different area of expertise, and they all add something different that can benefit to improving school safety and improving the school community as a whole. When we work together in these multidisciplinary teams, many positive outcomes can result. With school resource officers, depending upon the school level, the presence or lack thereof can differ. Typically in the state of Utah, many high schools have full-time school resource officers. Those officers spend the majority of their time, up to 5 days a week, on campus, being kind of the law enforcement know-all for that particular campus. In junior high, some districts operate differently. Some SROs are at the middle school full-time, just like the high school. Some SROs are at the middle school and share responsibilities between the middle school and different elementary schools. Some SROs are strictly at the middle school, but also do prevention programs like DARE or NOVA at elementary schools. And then typically, charter schools and private schools don't have SROs, although there are some outliers that do, that I am aware of, but typically those schools don't have them. And then your elementary schools typically don't have full-time SROs either. Out of the 41 LEAs in Utah, 34 have at least one full-time SRO. That's not saying that the schools have them, it's that the police departments or the LEAs in conjunction with the police departments have at least one full-time SRO that either splits their time between all of the schools or dedicates their time to one of the schools in there. The SROs may be assigned to high schools, middle schools, or elementary schools. Some SROs may be assigned to charter schools. As I said, it's not typical, but it does happen. Jerri, let's go ahead and move to the next one. Okay, so when we talk about SROs, there's a lot of different roles and responsibilities that SROs play. and different hats that they wear. The National Association of School Resource Officers, NASRO, kind of has a three-tiered approach, and I don't mean to confuse that with the three tiers that Scott was talking about. They actually call it the triad, and that is the police officer is a law enforcement officer, that police officer is a mentor, and that police officer is also a guest presenter or a teacher. So that SRO wears different hats far beyond that of just a law enforcement officer. But it's important to understand that the role should not be involved in school discipline. That SRO shouldn't be there to manage classrooms that teachers can't. They shouldn't be brought in to scare students. I've heard stories of principals in the past that have used the SROs to kind of do the scared straight method with students that are misbehaving in class. And that shouldn't be. That kind of that's counterproductive to what the role and responsibility of the SRO is. And it's counterproductive to what NASRO pushes on a nationwide basis of how the SRO should be utilized. So SROs should not be involved with code of conduct violations. They should not be involved with dress code violations. They should really be focused on the law enforcement part, if they're going to take any action, the law enforcement side of when crimes occur on campus, and if those crimes immediately affect the safety and security of the school or the overall school community. In addition to that, the SRO can assist school administrators in creating safe and secure environments. They work together as part of that multidisciplinary team, identify any shortcomings as far as physical shortcomings of the buildings, any safety issues that might arise. Something as simple as, hey, there's a leak. We need to identify maintenance to get down here, or there are some legitimate safety concerns with exits or entrances, or the amount of time, the exits that are being utilized and the frequency that children are able to leave from the school could pose a safety and security issue. And they work together on those multidisciplinary teams to try and come up with a safe solution. SROs investigate criminal offenses on campus. Their mere presence may deter crime. We don't like to say that SROs being there kind of have that militaristic presence or a militaristic personality, because that goes against what NASRO principles teach. However, the mere presence of a police officer on campus can deter criminals, whether inside or outside of the school environment. It can deter them from actually going in and committing crime. They can be used as a guest teacher or presenter. Some high schools specifically have an SRO that has a curriculum. They teach one law enforcement based class per semester. And it's usually part of the CTE classes that are taught within those high schools, or the applied technology centers for the different districts. SROs can be used as an integral part of the multidisciplinary team, which we've already discussed. They become a part of the school community. NASRO talks about proper selection of SROs. And when you select that proper SRO, or when you use proper selection to pick the SRO is going to want to be that person who wants to be part of the school community. They want to positively impact youth. And they do not want to be there just to, hammer kids, be a negative, have negative interactions with students. They want to be a part of that school community, and NASRO principles really push that proper selection. SROs also provide security for special events and school-sponsored activities outside of school hours. This would pertain to dances, football games, basketball games, any other school-sponsored activity that might need extra security. The SROs would be able to work that out with the schools. Okay, Jerry, next slide. The next couple slides are some slides that are based upon the school safety survey that was recently done in May. If you look at the graph for whatever reason, the formatting kind of messed up. if you look at the left side of the screen, those are going to be the 2019 numbers. If you look at the right side of the screen, it's going to be the 2020 numbers. There is positive interaction, or excuse me, the graph that you're looking at suggests that the SRO or another law enforcement officer is involved in the resolution of school safety incidents. And if you look, it has increased, the involvement has increased from 2009 to 2020. A lot of the times, it's sometimes that the SRO or law enforcement officer is involved with the resolution of school safety incidents. But the collaboration, I think the critical component of this slide is that the collaboration between law enforcement or with law enforcement has shown an increase. So they may not always be involved in the resolution of the incident. However, the collaboration has shown a significant increase between administrations and school resource officers, which is an upward trend and a positive trend. And typically, in my understanding of this, the law enforcement officer may be utilized in the situation. They may not necessarily make an arrest. They might not issue a citation, but there is that collaboration going on. Jerri, next slide. And also the collaboration is happening more frequently in district and charter schools. Something that we if you look at the 2019, the charter schools were almost non-existent. And in 2020, there is an increase. And in the districts, your increase is also shown very, very significantly, that the involvement or the collaboration is taking place. Jerri, next slide. This question is, as the school administrator, I feel that having an SRO at the school has the following impact on school climate. The important thing here, when you look at 2019 numbers and 2020, again, there's more respondents, there's more, 225 responded in 2019 and 440 responded in 2020. So there is a sharp increase of those who responded to the survey. But there's an overwhelming amount, 250 in 2020, respondents stated that they have a positive idea, or they feel that the SRO has a positive impact on school climate. 97, in addition to that, felt there was a somewhat positive. 78 felt there was a neutral. The biggest tell here is only 8 respondents felt that there was a somewhat negative response to having an SRO on the school campus. So it goes back to the multidisciplinary team. And Jerri, I think that was the last slide. If you want to go ahead, one, and then maybe if I think that is the last slide, if there's, oh, no, there's not. One of the biggest things on this is the collaboration. And when you look at the collaboration that takes place, it's not just an SRO and a principal. It is the SRO working together with school-based mental health. It is the SRO working together with school-based mental health and the administration. The SRO working with your CTE directors. The SRO working with the different teachers that are out there, the different coaches. It is a collaborative effort. And when the collaboration is taking place, it's going to have that positive impact on the school climate that you've seen in those slides. I would, and I'm not going to speak directly about the data, but in referencing, if you speak to administrators that might not have a overwhelmingly positive or somewhat positive response regarding SROs, it may be that collaboration is not taking place. The SRO has many resources, and you have to understand that when an SRO goes into the school, they're not coming directly off the street from the police academy. They have a level of experience that would be comparable to that of detectives, to that of different levels of experience that actually shows that they have to prove themselves as a patrol officer before they go into the school. So they do have a level of experience there that has been measured by some level of success within their own agency. And many of the SROs have additional roles outside of the school that can also be used to improve school climate. School resource officers may have involvements in the local youth court. And when I say youth court, I don't mean the juvenile court. It is youth courts and peer courts are diversion, courts of diversion, kind of evidence-based practices that are utilized rather than having say a juvenile commits a status offense or a juvenile commits a Class C misdemeanor. Well, those offenses, because of House Bill 239, which was passed in 2016, and House Bill 132, which was passed in 2018, those offenses can't be referred to juvenile court unless the individual refuses to cooperate with an evidence-based practice. And so youth courts and peer courts can be part of those evidence-based practices and diversion agreements for these students. SROs may also be responsible for police explorer programs or cadet programs where they are mentoring, almost in like a police-based ROTC. They're mentoring youth who want to have an interest in law enforcement or who want to become law enforcement officers in the future. SROs may also help with coaching on campus. They may help with athletic programs. They can also be involved in other extracurricular activities such as the driver education programs. They have a knowledge as well as the area youth programs. So there might be SROs in some counties throughout that have, or in some states that have a strong partnership with YMCA, Big Brothers Big Sisters. There might be SROs that have involvement in what they call the police athletic leagues that kind of give athletic program opportunities to students. So when you look at this collaboration, it really kind of even goes beyond the school at times. But the SRO is a critical role with this collaboration. And when schools, communities, and law enforcement work together, positive results occur. Those positive results can include increased ability to gather and analyze information about the school crime, school safety. It can also lead to developing innovative and long-term approaches to crime prevention and school safety. It helps prevent unnecessary law enforcement and non-criminal misbehavior, which we've already talked about. With the SROs shouldn't be involved with code of conduct issues or dress code issues. There's an increased understanding of how to deal with youth based on coordinated training. When school administrators and SROs work together, they can work together to go to the trainings that can help the SRO understand youth and childhood development, cultural awareness, and other training programs that maybe the SRO wouldn't have if they were just going through a law enforcement officer training. The administration, the school's administration, the school-based mental health can also direct that SRO into what training may help them succeed in that program. And again, I just want to touch on the collaboration aspect of this. Without a multidisciplinary team, you have different experts working off of their own little islands. When you have that multidisciplinary approach, everybody works together to have that community feel and that community approach to schools. And I will turn the time back over to Jerri.
Okay. So Amanda, I just wanted to check with you. We've gone over a little bit. Are you okay if we go back and talk about these questions, or
Yeah.
Are you very time sensitive and you need us to end?
No, you're good. Nick and I had a little bit of cushion time built into ours, so we've got time to do some Q&A with you guys.
Okay, good. Okay, so here are these questions that we brought up at the first of our presentation. And please feel free, let's talk and see if you have, hopefully by now you know what a multidisciplinary team is. Does anyone have any questions about a multidisciplinary team? And then will one of you guys watch the chat and see, or anybody just come on and talk to us? We want to have a discussion. Any questions about that?
Jerri, I will watch the chat for you guys, but like I said, you guys are, like Jerri said, excuse me, you're welcome to unmute yourselves or add your question in the chat, and then I can read it out to Jerri, whatever works best for everybody.
Okay, so let's move on to number 2 then. how do student service providers address the whole child? Hopefully, within our presentation, you were able to get a feel for how we're looking at the whole child, K-12. Do you have any questions about or comments about that? Okay, so how can, this is a big thing that we wanted to hopefully achieve and figure out and get your input. How can we partner with you more effectively? What are your thoughts?
I will also add for perhaps our shy friends, if you want to send me a private chat and ask your questions anonymously, I can do that for you as well. Now's your time to go ahead and ask these three experts the questions you have.
And crickets. All right. So this is really something that, is there anything?
We did get a comment. So this one says, we need counselors to help us know when one of our students is struggling.
So what does that mean? Are we talking grades? Are we coming are we talking about if they were to come into the counseling office and needing help? What are we talking about there?
When the counselors, let's see, we need that we read that. Okay, if they're coming in for help.
Okay, so they want to know if a student is coming to the counseling center.
Yeah, I think they're looking for that collaboration between the counselor and the mentor, just so that the mentor could be aware that perhaps that student needs a little more support from the mentor as well.
Okay. The only thing
and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and just be aware, the only thing that we get into there is a level of confidentiality. And so probably we just have to be really careful. So the mentor, make sure that you have a great relationship with the counseling center and that they know who you are and what students you're working with so that you can have that collaboration. And then that can be brought to the multidisciplinary team within your school. And I think the administrator should be part of that conversation also.
Jerri, if I could add to that, I think that's
Yes.
a really an insightful question and a big place where we as a group collectively can drop the ball. There's a gap there. Working in JJS for 3 years, you get attached to those kiddos that you work with and you want to see them do well, and you see that they are doing well with certain structures, and then putting them back into a place of you know, in school or other things. I will tell you that the most important work that I did oftentimes was walking into that school, finding the person, giving the warm handoff and saying, listen, Johnny, this is so-and-so who you can speak to if you need anything, just let them know. And for social workers, I'll say for social workers, we're as licensed mental health professionals, we are under the banner of HIPAA as well. So, you know, those things that Jerry's saying with communication and data and private matters need to be respected. And so that is important. However, having that warm handoff and that open line of communication between professionals is so important.
Thanks, Scott. Anything else? Okay, so the next question is, if you wanted us to take a message back to our field, what would you want us to convey to them?
Jerri?
Yes.
This is Ann with Granite School District. I think in my mind, if there was a message that I would like you guys to take back, it would be that mentors are in a really unique position to help the counseling system. We know things about the kids. We understand the whole, we kind of have been privy to the whole picture. And if we could build a bridge where counselors and mentors were sharing information and helping each other, I think that would be so beneficial to the students that we work with. So I guess the message I think that would be really helpful is to be sure if a student does have a check and connect mentor that they are being invited to meetings and that they're being kept in the loop. And the same goes the other way, that, you know, I would want us as mentors to make sure that we are including counselors in the loop when, like Scott pointed out, in some of these pivotal moments in their lives, that we don't have to help them all by ourselves, that we have this great counseling system out there that we can tap into to help us, to help them to navigate. So I guess my thing would just be, let's be a team. You know, let's use you and have you use us.
I love that. Thank you, Anne. That's a great point, and I absolutely can take that back to counselors, and I'm sure Scott and Jeremy can take that back to their field also. But we all work as a team together, not in silos, and that is the point of multidisciplinary teams. Any other thoughts?
I did see a question on the chat from an iPhone user, and it says, do school officers know that we exist? And I think that's a good question. When I was an SRO at Corner Canyon, I did know of the existence of the Youth in Custody mentors. I did not know who specifically was with Corner Canyon. With police officers, we adhere to that strict chain of command, and we were, and I guess I'm speaking for me personally, I worked really closely with the counseling staff and the school administrative staff. So if we knew that there was a youth in custody, they would come meet with me, inform me, hey, this kid's gonna need a little bit of support. Here's what we know, and we would kind of have that conversation. But I didn't ever know directly who the mentor was that was assigned to the school. I knew who the juvenile court probation officers were that were assigned to the school, but I didn't know the actual mentor. And I think that's a really good question. And maybe a piece that we definitely want to explore in the future of making that relationship more obvious.
Okay, any more thoughts? Or Scott, Jeremy, anything else you want to say in closing?
I've got to run to another meeting, but I did want to just thank everyone for the hard work that they do. I know this is taxing work and it's hard, and it takes everyone coming together on this. And Jerri, just make sure that at the end of this, we leave our contact. If there's anyone who's reaching out or needing extra supports in these things, please don't hesitate. We can support you and help to do whatever we need to do, make sure that we can have a positive impact on these youth's lives. So thank you, everyone, for all you do.
Anything, Jeremy, do you want to close with?
No, I think we've talked about it, and I think the collaboration is just key moving forward. And the more collaboration, the better the outcome.
Thank you. And I just want to say I kind of missed telling you this. So when I was at Twilla School District and working at the district office, I was so involved with youth in custody. In fact, I kind of oversaw that program. And so I know what you guys do. Kelly Russell and I worked hand in hand together, and been very involved with youth in custody, and I just appreciate all the work that you guys do and how you're so integral to the success of these youth that are in custody. So thank you for all that you do, and thanks Amanda for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and try and collaborate. I think some good things came out of this, and for sure we'll take this back to our Safe and Healthy Schools team and try and increase the communication and collaboration between youth and custody mentors and the student services. So appreciate the time and the opportunity.
You're welcome. And you know, likewise, we appreciate you guys taking the time to spend with us this morning and give us some more information on the collaboration and the multidisciplinary teams.
Great.
And
well, I will stop sharing so you can have your meeting back.
okay. So
all right.
With our post-training survey, I will send all three Jerry's, Jeremy's, and Scott's contact info with the follow-up email that gives you guys your post-training survey link and all that. So
okay.
Thank you so much, and you guys have a great day. Okay, so next up is Nick Shellabarger and I believe Nick should be ready to share his screen, and he will get the conversation started for us about the data.
Amanda, you should be more excited about this.
This is why I asked you to start, Nick.
Yes, it is time, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about data. I know you are all very excited to be here right now. Talking about the how and the why of data collection with Check and Connect. Let me share my screen so you can stare at the awesome PowerPoint that I am staring at. All right, Check and Connect's data. So what is data? We're going to start with a quick, simple definition of data, and then things will get fun around here. Data, facts, and statistics collected together for reference and analysis. A really pretty simple definition to start with, but to simplify it even further, data is the information that we're gathering to do something with, right? It's information with purpose. So as we're talking about this data, the different types of data, the different elements of data today, think about why we're collecting this data and what benefit it has to the students that we serve. And data is fun. I might be a little different than most people. I think that's been proven time and again, but I think data is fun, and that's probably why I'm in this position. But I'm going to try and prove it to you with a few examples. Look at some of these statistics here. The first one, the average American eats nearly 13 pounds of ice cream per year. I have no idea how this data was collected, whether it's valid or not, but I like this because in most aspects of my life, I am subpar. I'm average or below average. However, with this statistics, I am excelling. I am apparently, I would imagine, in like the top standard deviation of American ice cream eaters, because 13 pounds sounds like nothing to me. Data is fun and sometimes a little bit concerning. 1/3 of adults still sleep with a comfort object, right? Honestly, I'm not concerned whether or not you are sleeping with a teddy bear. If you are, that's okay. You do you. But you're sleeping with a teddy bear and also confident enough to admit to that, that is impressive to me. Sometimes data is fun and concerning. This statistic here, and again, my statistics were based on a very quick Google search. So if they're not valid, I apologize. But this said the average drunk driver drives under the influence more than 80 times before being arrested, right? 80 times drunk drivers. So I look at this data and I wonder, well, what's the point, right? Why are we sharing this data here? And in this case, there's two possibilities that come to mind. First, that we're not doing well enough with our anti-drunk driving messaging, right? Whether it's billboards or commercials or teaching in school, I don't know what the case is, but if someone's driving under the influence 80 times before being arrested, the message isn't getting out there, right? Option number one. Or option number two, which I'd like to preface this by saying I do not believe this in any way at all, but maybe drunk driving isn't actually that dangerous, right? If someone's driving under the influence 80 times without incident, I don't know, that maybe, if we're arguing the counterpoint, says, hey, drunk driving is not that big of a deal. I'd like to again stress, drunk driving is a big deal. Please do not do so. Here's some data that's fun because it's relevant, right? How many of our students do we deal with? I was a teacher in high school and junior high for a long time. How many students do we deal with that their plan is to become a professional athlete, right? And the answer is a lot. There's a lot of students who have this plan, right? And so I pulled this data. This actually is relevant data. It came straight from the NCAA website that fewer than 2% of NCAA college athletes go on to be professional athletes, right? 2%, which actually doesn't sound horrible, but then when we go back to the fact that high school athletes going to college is only 6%. So if we look at the number of high school athletes becoming professional athletes, I'm not like hugely good at math, but we're looking at about 1 in 1,000 here, right? 1 in 1,000 student athletes is going on to become a professional athlete. And even that maybe doesn't sound too bad to some of our students, but remember, we're talking student athletes, not just students. So if you have a school of 1,500, guessing maybe a third of those are student athletes, we're looking at like 1 student in every 400 schools is going to become a professional athlete, right? So data is fun in that we can use it to work with our kids. Data is sometimes fun because it's concerning. The global rate for washing hands after using the toilet is under 20%. Kelly Russell, I just saw you laugh at that. I share your concern. An average day, only 19% of American men do housework as compared to 49% of American women. I keep debating whether or not I'm supposed to share this with my wife to justify my actions or if that plan will backfire. I love this one. The acceptance rate at Harvard is 5.2%. So everyone who's applying to Harvard to go to school there, they accept 5.2% of those students. The acceptance rate at Walmart, so everyone who applies to work at Walmart, is only 2.6%. So you're actually more likely to go to Harvard, to be accepted to Harvard, than to be accepted to Walmart, in a way. And this, of course, my favorite statistic of all time. Thank you, Brian. My favorite statistic of all time, the average person has fewer than 2 legs, which, give it a minute. Again, I'm not great at math, but the math works out. The average person has fewer than 2 legs. Let's say you have 10 people in a room and well, 9 people and 1 pirate, right? Then what is that? 0.95% of the people have, or the average leg per person is 1.95, I think 1.9, right? If you have 100 people or 99 people, 1 pirate, then we have the average is 1.99, right? No matter how many people you have, as long as one has fewer than 2 legs, the average is less. My favorite statistic of all time. All right. So keep in mind as we move forward that data is fun and statistics are fun. So maybe even write it on a piece of paper in front of you. So as I'm droning on here in the next few minutes, you can continue to glance at that and remember that this is fun. Talking about different types of data, some buzzwords that you'll probably hear, especially in education data. The first is personally identifiable information. This is information or data that points to a specific student. Right? This is when we're starting to talk about student names or birthdays or student ID numbers or a particular student in a particular school at a particular time. Any information that can be pointed towards one student. This is the kind of information that you have to be most careful about. I think it was Jeremy that was talking about some of the guidelines that restrict our, actually, nope, it wasn't Jeremy, but I don't remember who it was. But someone was talking about HIPAA guidelines, right? That dictate what information can be shared across. There's actually lots of guidelines. In education, primarily, we are bound by FERPA guidelines, right? And Utah FERPA that restrict the type of information in personally identifiable personally identifiable information that we can share and with whom we can share it, right? But we're also FERPA, HIPAA, we work with human services a lot, so there's also GRAMA, there's a lot of different federal regulations and state regulations that prohibit the personally identifiable information that we can share. So when you're sending emails, when you're writing notes, when you're having conversations, unless you're sure that the information can be appropriately shared, be wary of sharing information that identifies individual students. Now, of course, as counselors, you work with as mentors, you work with students in a way that you do have to share this information with a lot of people, and a lot of people who have appropriate access to the information. So when you're talking to teachers, when you're talking to counselors, when you're talking to administrators, these are usually covered within the guidelines, right? If you're unsure, feel free to ask your administrators how much information you should be sharing. The good news for me is I don't have to worry about that personally too much. I don't deal at my level with individual students, right? You guys deal with individual students absolutely all the time, right? The level of data that comes up the chain is the second criteria, de-identified data, right? I get a lot of emails, and the emails say something like, we have a student who has this issue, right? There's no need for me to know the specifics for the student. It's information about individual students, but with any identifying information removed. And aggregate data kind of takes that a step further. It's information about groups of students without any identifying information. So when we're looking at check and connect data that we're collecting, you are collecting personal level information for individual students. It's very important to your job, right? You're also creating the basis for de-identified data and aggregate data, which will flow up to your administration and to the state administration. And we'll kind of talk about that, the reason for that here in just a second. You might need to take a second real quick to look down at your note that you took that said data is fun, because it's still fun here, right? Talking about the kind of the kind of data that we're collecting here. I mean, data in this world right now is more prevalent than ever before. Do you know that when you're on the Facebook and you're scrolling through and you pause to look at a particular post or a particular video, that Facebook is collecting data on your computer screen movement, right? They're collecting how long you're looking at specific posts. And they use that information to determine which posts are more likely to appear on your screen to keep you staring at that screen longer, right? Crazy data. We do not collect how long students are staring at specific posts, but there are a lot of stuff that we do collect, right? Academic information. So we're looking at student growth, at the courses that students are enrolled in, you know, how they're doing in those courses, what their grades look like, what their completion rate is, with their progress towards graduation, of course, right? All of this computer data that we can access immediately on the student information system to know where a student stands academically. We love to test our students. I might have mentioned that I'm a little weird. I loved taking tests in high school and junior high. I'm happy to report that I have one daughter out of 3 who also loves taking tests. I took the AP test, or sorry, the ACT test multiple times because it was like a fairly cheap all-day Saturday activity that was very enjoyable, right? You could go answer lots of questions and find out what you knew, and then go home and brag to your friends how smart you were. You know, and I think a lot of kids do that. I think it's very, very common for kids to love to take tests, right? Which is why we do quizzes all the time in class, right? We give formal tests in class. Teachers do informal, formative assessments, interim assessments, right? We're always checking what does a student know, how much have they learned, what do they still need to learn? And then as a state, we do the same thing, right? And we're like, how much did the student learn, and why is it the teacher's fault that the student learned that? whatever, right? We're testing these kids like crazy. And we get a lot of data out of that, and hopefully some good data. There's demographic data that tells us a little bit about the student, right? We might jump to some conclusions based on demographic data, but we also notice trends, right? When we're looking at age. I've talked a few times with Ann Jones about different needs at different ages, right? So knowing a student's age helps you understand possibly what that student might be in need of as far as interventions and help, right? We also look at race, gender, economic status, special education needs, trying to identify areas in which we could do better as far as demographics. And then, of course, student actions, right? We talked about academic information and almost talk about that like apart from what the student is doing. But the student's actions is a separate set of data that we're definitely interested in as Check and Connect mentors. This is the one area where we really feel like we can teach and influence the work that a student is doing, right? Looking very closely at their attendance, looking at their classroom behaviors, their out of class behaviors, any behavior really, their extracurricular activities, what are they doing outside of class, what programs are they involved in, and so forth, right? So these are the types of data that we are considering important. We're not looking at shoe size or soda preference or whatever. We're looking at stuff that points towards success in school. And this is what we do with the data. This is straight from the mentor training, which I assume most of you have had. The mentor uses data to, I love this first one, to share with the student, right? We collect data on the student, and then we go to the student and say, hey, student, here's your data, which, on first thought, I would think, well, the student knows how much they've been attending school, right? They know what their attendance is. They're the ones attending or not attending, right? How many of us need someone else to tell us what we're doing? Think about this for a second. I'll maybe mention my wife, and because she's not here and she'll never watch this. Did you know on your cell phone, both Android and Apple, there's ways to track your cell phone usage, right? On Android, there's an app called Wellbeing that's built into the phone. And if I open that Wellbeing app on my wife's phone, I guarantee that I am getting dirty looks. Well, if I open it and she knows I open it, those, I guess, are two different stories. But this tracks how long you've been on your phone, how many times you've unlocked it, how long you've spent on each app, right? And I would assume my wife would know this stuff. She's the one using her phone, but she doesn't, right? When I feel that I'm concerned she's maybe using her phone too much and I pull this data up, she's often surprised at what the data shows, right? And I think our students are the same, right? Yes, they know that they occasionally skip first period because first period isn't that fun. But when you pull the data out that you've collected and you share it with the student, hey, you're missing first period a third of the time. Sometimes that's very surprising to students. Hey, you're doing great in all your classes except you're not turning in homework in this class, right? That may be surprising to a student who's been working very diligently to make sure all their assignments are in, right? So we share data with students to help them understand what they're really doing. And we use that data both as the student and as a mentor to start to recognize patterns, right? This is a big part of our training. How do we recognize the patterns in behaviors, right? Whether it's attendance or tardies or classroom behavior, assignment submissions, we're always looking for patterns within that data, right? What is the student doing, not just once, but in a reoccurring way that might point toward a pattern which would necessitate an intervention, right? Looking at this specific data to help the student recognize a pattern and disrupt that pattern if it's a negative pattern, for sure. There are always positive patterns and there's always positive data. And that's the next thing we do is celebrate those successes with our students, right? When we're looking at student data, I hope that you're doing this, that you're celebrating success every single time that you look at student data. Right? Our students, my own kids, my 13-year-old, who I assume is like every other 13-year-old in the world, driving me insane. I talk to her in a very kind and loving way. And she looks right at me, you don't care about anything I do, right? And it reminds me, I need to focus more on celebrating the successes with her as a teenager, as a child, as a human being, because that's where we operate, right? We want to do better. For the most part, humans want to do better, right? And celebrating those successes, we all know is often more of a lever to do even more good than recognizing deficiencies, right? So use the data to celebrate successes. And then of course, determine level and type of intervention. As we're recognizing these patterns, as we're seeing issues, as we're celebrating successes and noticing those areas that could hopefully be celebrated in the future, we're working with our students and the data to determine the level and type of intervention. All right, so this is kind of mentor level stuff, and I'm sure that you're all very familiar with what's going on with the mentor level stuff. But today we're talking about recording this data a little more and the process which will send that data up the chain through your administration and to the State Board of Education, right? Because we're talking about why data is important to mentors. I'm sure you're all very aware. To your schools and school districts, you probably see that quite a bit, right? Schools are making decisions on the type of interventions that they provide based on the effectiveness of those interventions, right? And your data supports the effectiveness of this particular intervention. If you can show that Check and Connect mentors are effective in improving outcomes for students, then your school, your administration is going to recognize that effectiveness that we already know and we already understand. They're going to see that and not only help you maintain the work that you're doing, but also help spread that work. We brought Amanda on as a Check and Connect specialist at the State Board for this very reason, because the good work that you're doing and the data that it is creating is spreading. Right? And schools and school districts outside of YIC are recognizing the effectiveness of the work that we do, right? And it's helping to grow. And in growing, not only does it help continue to serve the students that we hold near and dear to our hearts, but it also helps serve students at large throughout the schools, all at-risk students, which hasn't always been the case with Check and Connect, right? We've been fairly limited to YIC students. I'd love to see a world in the very near future where YIC has very little to do with access to a Check and Connect mentor when a student needs that intervention. Which brings us to why we need it at the USBE level. At the Utah State Board of Education, the data that comes up to us I can't stress how important it is now more than ever. We know from the stories that we've been told, from the students that we've seen, and from all the mentors that we work with, how important and effective this work is. However, stories aren't going to sell the product. We need facts and figures, right? I'm going to give you a little insight into my life and my job right here. This is Utah Code 53E-3-503, Section B, Part 2. Right, this is the kind of stuff I do all day long, almost every single day. I'm looking at code and statute and board rule and reading it and trying to make sense of it. This is a part that really concerns me. This is a recent change. Oh, by the way, Utah Code 53E-3-503 is the Utah state law that dictates education for youth in custody. Right? And this is just a small part of it. But this is a big change made in the last year. The board shall expend funds appropriately for the education of youth in custody in the following order of priority. Now we're talking about roughly $26 million that the state has allocated for youth in custody education, right? Of that money, this is how they want to allocate it. First, A, for students in a facility described in subsection who are not included in an LEA's average daily membership, right? So students in a facility that aren't considered students of a particular school. We're talking primarily about students like in detention centers or residential treatment centers or long-term secure, right? These kids aren't pulling in a WPU for their school. They're not counted as daily students, right? So first, we have to prioritize those students, money to those residential kids. Second, for students in a facility described in subsection 1A, which are those I just mentioned, who are included in an LEA's average daily membership and who may benefit from additional educational support services. Now, as near as I can tell, this talks about students who are in a setting like a residential treatment center who are attending a traditional school. Now, we might be talking about like there's some RTCs in Tooele School District, or one RTC in Tooele School District that operates this way. They're in a facility, but they are counted as part of the daily school membership. I believe some of our ALTA programs function this way, that students are in an ALTA facility, but are counted as average daily membership. Now, I point this out because I want you to see very explicitly who is not included in this definition of funds priority for that $26 million. Think about the students whom you serve. Are they in a facility, either one that is counted in an LEA average daily membership or not counted? The problem is that we face is that the majority of the students that we work with don't fall under this definition, right? That as they're looking at the use of YIC funds, we're not talking directly about foster care youth in a traditional school setting, who is the majority of the students whom we serve with Check and Connect services, right? And this scares me. I'll be honest, it scares me. I don't want to scare you because I don't think it's leading to a change of any kind. I don't think services will change, but to ensure that, the definition has to change. And in order for the definition to change, in order for us to make sure that we are including youth in custody who are at risk because of the mere fact that they're youth in custody, that they're included in the prioritization of this funding source. And the way for me to do that is by changing board rule and state code. And the only way for me to change board rule or state code is to carefully and systematically collect data that shows A, that there's a need, B, that need is not being met already with another funding source, and C, that the need is being appropriately and effectively met by the services that we offer. That's why I'm here today begging you to see that data is important. It's important for you on your level, dealing directly with each individual student. It's important on your school and district level to make sure that these services are available to many students. And it's important at the state level so that we can ensure that these kids who are near and dear to us continue to be served. I'm going to turn the time over to Amanda now, who is going to go over the tool, which is a little bit changed, but probably very familiar to us all, of the information that we're collecting and hopefully funneling up through your administration and to the state level so that we can accomplish this important work together that needs to happen in order for us to continue to offer these services. Amanda, you are on.
All right, thank you, Nick. I appreciate you so much. I'm so glad that you're here to be our data cheerleader. But I'm like Nick in that I'm begging you guys to submit this data as complete as possible. I know it's, especially at the beginning of the year and the beginning of terms, it's kind of a heavy lift to get some of the initial data loaded in, but it will help us in so many ways. So let me go ahead. I'm going to share the updated weekly monitoring form. So let's see if this works. And then I got to move my little tiles around so I can still see the chat and stuff. Bear with me here just a minute. Okay, are you all seeing the Excel spreadsheet? Okay, Kelly says yes, so I believe her. Okay, so this is the Excel version. I have also, when I'm done with this, we'll download it into a PDF that can be fillable. And then Granite's team has gone the step to create a Google form, or excuse me, Google Forms, they have more than one, to capture this data. So there are multiple ways for us to be capturing this data. And one of my post-training survey questions today is, how are you guys collecting your data? So you will see in the Excel spreadsheet, I've tried to color code some of the cells. Oh, and let me step back. These are ADA compliant colors. I apologize for the way that they don't necessarily go well together, but this is ADA compliant and something that I can post on our website, which I'm hoping will make the resource easier for everybody to find. So you're just looking for cells that kind of pop out, and then, for those of you that are familiar with the forms from Check and Connect, this just is an adaptation of their form. I did go ahead and merge it into one instead of having an elementary and a secondary. If we're finding that you still want to have those two separate forms, that's something we can take care of down the road and send out or post. But you just come in as you're meeting with your students weekly and you're tracking their attendance data, behavior data, and course performance. So of course our ABCs. And then down here, we're also tracking basic interventions as well as intensive interventions. There's not many changes to this particular spreadsheet other than I did merge the two different grade levels into one. So let me go ahead. Well, actually, do we have any questions real quick on this one before I move over? Because I want to take some time to show you the changes I made to the term summary, the mentor caseload summary that we turn in at the end of each term, because that one's got some drop downs and some new stuff that I've added over the summer. So let's see, nothing in the chat. Okay, so I will go ahead and share the other part, or excuse me, the other spreadsheet. Bear with me just a moment. Okay, so I have this in the itty bitty view so that you can see I've turned it into two different, or excuse me, that's 2 pages. Just wanted to point that out to everybody before we got started. I know sometimes I get consumed with what's on the screen and I forget to look at everything, but that may just be me. So I've gone in and done some test students to kind of give you some idea of how this is going to work. But just like the other ones, I've tried to color code cells that you're going to want to put in. So you'd put in here which district you're with at the top. And then if you're a coordinator, you're listing your mentors. If this is just you as a mentor, you can go ahead and copy and paste yourself all the way down, which is super easy. Excuse me. So the first drop down we've created is this DHS provider. So when you click on it, it opens to the, excuse me, and I don't know if I did that too quickly, but when you click into the cell, this little drop down menu appears over on the right. And that's where you click to get the additional choices. And this is information that you can get from your student intake forms as you're enrolling students, or work with your coordinators and directors to get if needed. Goodness, we're gonna have a tickle in our throat. Also, we've changed this column for the service provider, and these are the different agencies and organizations that you might need to collaborate with your student, especially if they also have individuals who would want to pull out students and take time with them. We'd like to see them, see you collaborate with them so that we're not both pulling out at the same day or the same week, or finding ways that we can just do one pullout. Excuse me, I was taking a drink there. Okay, so then moving right along, you just fill in the information as to which school they're attending and grade level. We want to know if they have an IEP or a Section 504 plan, and I've created hyperlinks in the headers of these cells that will take you to the state board websites that give you more information on that if needed. Oh, excuse me. And then, like we've always done, we're going to track their D's and F's this term. One of the new changes, let me scoot over, we've made this summer is that we want to look at the credits the students had prior to receiving Check and Connect services. So that's, in this example, like our 10th grader came in with 4.25 credits, and our high schooler came in with 13. So obviously, and then on our elementary and our junior high, we just are listing NA because those students are not, we're not tracking credits yet for them. That will be our 9th grade and above. And so if the cell doesn't apply, I really would appreciate an NA, just so we're not looking at loads of blank cells. The other thing we've changed is that we, oh, excuse me, and then I forgot, we do want to know the credits earned while they're in CNC each term, so that we can see, like in our example, hopefully, like in our example, the increase in the credits the students are earning while they're receiving mentor services. And then the GPA is the same story. So we want the GPA prior to receiving the Check and Connect mentor services, and then their cumulative GPA at the end of each term. And like our examples, we're hoping to see an upward trend there as well. The attendance column is just the overall attendance for the end of that term. Same with suspensions, and we're no longer on the term summary going to track the behaviors. That will just be done, behavior referrals. That will just be done on the weekly monitoring. And then we've gone ahead and created a drop down in the high risk category as well. I do realize some students are going to be high risk in more than one category, but I want you to pick what is the major concern. And that leads me to the next cell, which is the primary intervention used this term. If you would prefer to list the student in multiple rows and list every single intervention that you're doing with the students, we can collect all that data. But I was feeling like that might be laborsome and taxing on some of the mentors. So we, on the header, have just called it the primary intervention used this term. And this one's also a drop down. So you'll see on the right, the little extra arrow pops open and gives you the choices, which are basic Check and Connect interventions, facilitate goal setting, facilitate problem solving skills, and engagement in school and community activities. And then the other cell we've changed is the reason for exit. Again, it's a drop down that you click on to pick the choice that makes the best sense for your student. The reason for these drop downs is really just to standardize the data that we're receiving so that we can compare apples and apples and oranges and oranges. But if you're finding that this is not working, I need that feedback so that we can maybe look at changing it if necessary. So let me see. Do we have any questions on either of the templates or anything you'd like to go back and ask Nick on? You're welcome to unmute yourselves or share in the chat. Just like before, if you prefer, you can do it anonymously. So I do see in the chat here a few things. Let me back up to the top. Okay, so suggestions for COVID guidelines. I did send out an email that had some USBE back to school recommendations, but primarily you need to follow whatever your school district guidelines are. Each school district created a return to school plan, and so you're just going to want to follow whatever instructions your school district has given you, and talk to your YIC or student services director if you're finding problems with that. In the back to school guidance from us, we did give resources for online meeting options, as well as, like, if needed, setting up a Google Voice line so that you can share out a phone number, but not necessarily your personal cell phone number with the students, because we are still expecting you to be meeting with your students weekly. It might look very different than years past. You might be needing to meet with them virtually, by phone, FaceTime, you know, multiple varieties if we're still having social distancing issues. So the next question is about Google Sheets. Yes, that was more of a labor lift than I realized this summer, and unexpectedly not having power last week has left me behind. So I am going to work on getting Google Forms out, but just so they're not rushed and they're not problematic, that probably won't be until the next term. I will have the Excel spreadsheet and the PDF out to you all by the end of the week, if not sooner. Let's see. So the next one, it says some schools are not tracking attendance. Yes, with all of what's going on with COVID, we realized that attendance data this particular term, and maybe even next term or even all school year, might be hard to collect. Do the best you can. If they're not tracking at all, just put an NA in that column, and that will help me understand that your district was not tracking data, or that particular school was not tracking data. I know I have kiddos in charter schools myself. The next one, let's see. We collect data but turn it in at the end. So there's two different forms. You will have the weekly monitoring, which actually is set up for 5 weeks, so basically a whole month that you can be using. And then you'll take those monthly monitorings at the end of each term and create your Utah mentor caseload summary, or your coordinator or your director will. It kind of varies by district how the caseload summary is prepared. Some districts just have their mentors do them and send them right over to me. Other districts have a mentor coordinator that collects all of their mentors' information and compiles it into one spreadsheet with multiple sheets, and then they send that to me. But yes, you should be turning it in to me at the end of each quarter. And if you have questions about that, please talk to your directors. Please contact me.
Amanda?
Yes.
This is Tracy Deemer. My question was, do we turn in the weekly reports, or is that just totally for our information for the end of the quarter data?
That is for you and your director's information, and then to compile the end of quarter data.
Okay, so we don't turn them in, we just use them for the end of quarter data.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So next comment, what if a student leaves another program within the state? That is very valid. So we will need to add that to the drop down. So let me make myself a note, excuse me. Okay. And then after that comment, let me scroll down and see what's next. So these sheets I will email out. Really hopeful to have them out to you by tomorrow, but I do have a crane and 5 National Guard trucks outside my house because, as I mentioned, when we opened, Rose Park tried to blow away last Tuesday. And so there's still trees on my neighbors' houses and some stuff. So my power and Wi-Fi has been iffy, but I'm very hopeful to have that out by tomorrow, but it might not be till Friday if something wonky happens with my power again. Yes, once I get the Google Forms, the next question was about a link to use the form on your computer. Yes, once I get the Google Forms in a shareable, usable format, I will make sure if I need to work with you guys one-on-one to get them usable on your systems, we'll get that squared away. Okay, so that looks like all of the chat comments so far. So if you have any other questions and you'd like to unmute yourselves, please do so. We have, oh gosh, another 28 minutes. So plenty of time for Q&A, or I get to be the fun person that lets you guys go early. I got Ann to laugh at me at the very least. So.
Amanda, on this student ID, is that the court ID number that you're wanting that we used to do?
No, this will be
It's the school ID number?
Yes, and that should be the same one as the state identification number. We're trying to make sure, like that earlier comment, if they move from one district to another, that we're able to track them.
Hey, Amanda.
Yes, please.
A lot of the districts have your student ID number, and then this is the state student ID number. So it's usually two separate numbers. In our district, all of our student ID numbers start with a 9. So, you know, it's probably not the one you're used to collecting, but it should be on documents somewhere. It stands for state student identification number. So it's different than your school one, but it should be on whatever program you are accessing.
Okay, we used to put these on and then they took them off and now we put them on again. They're usually on the intake.
Yeah, and yes, they are usually.
Okay.
No, not necessarily.
No?
Okay.
Not necessarily the intake. I mean, sometimes they are, and caseworkers that do that, I think we should throw them a parade. But a lot of them, you're gonna have to go to your school information. I know for our district, it's Discovery, and it will be on there somewhere. But you might have to dig a little bit to get to that number. But once you figure out where it is, it'll be no good.
So,
Okay, thank you.
yes, and that, I think that was Cynthia, right? So Cynthia, just if you're having issues with tracking that down, talk to your director. And then if that's not something easily identifiable, talk to me and Nick and Julia, and we'll help make sure we get, you know, whatever access you need. I know it varies, like in different districts, they have Aspire and Power School and Discovery, Canvas. Oh wait, no, Canvas doesn't track it that way, but there's multiple different student identification systems, but we are looking for the state student ID number. Like I said, that's so that we can track them if they move within the state, and help align their information that way.
Amanda, Jeff made a comment on the chat that I think is important to connect to this. In most SIS programs, your school's information system, it will just say SSID will be the identifier for the state student identification number. So if you see SSID, which will be included in every SIS, that's the number we're looking for on there.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff and Nick. This is where you guys can tell that I've been at the State Board of Education my whole career, and I haven't tracked student data. So sometimes I find myself lacking in this arena that I have found myself in charge of. So thank you for helping me along the way. Okay, any other questions, comments, items that we're not seeing on the drop-down menus that you think we're gonna need? Give you guys about 30 seconds or so to think about that.
Amanda, this is Dawn.
Yes, Dawn.
I just want to say that I am truly grateful for the program that we have in our district. Everything is collected through that and sent to you guys, and I'm feeling really relieved right now. So I'm thankful to Ann and Trina for providing that for us.
I would echo that, because they're testing the waters in this Google Forms universe has kind of helped us move it further along the road statewide, just to help everybody have easier access to collecting and reporting data. Okay, we have another comment. Let's see. With DHS provider, aren't they all YIC? Even if they're from DCFS or DJJS, what is the difference in this collection? Oh, and thank you, Ann. So YIC is if they're not assigned to DCFS or DJJS. So Ann, could you elaborate on that one a little bit for us?
Sure. Sometimes in our district, we're asked to pick up students that, for instance, have recently come out of JJS care or out of DCFS care. So technically, they're not still assigned to DCFS or DJS, So we need a way to be able to enroll them that doesn't assign them to an agency that are not assigned to. Does that make sense? So if you ever have kids that, let's say for instance, they go out of DCFS custody, but the caseworker said, could you continue seeing them until the end of the school year? Then we want to reclassify them as YIC students, or if we have some kids that come in and they aren't currently in either of those two programs, that gives us a place to put them. Does that make sense?
Let's see.
Amy, are you there? Does it make sense?
Well, and then she's also asking what, let's see, what about students who are in residential centers? So would that be the DJJS choice?
It depends on who has placed them there. So if they're in residential centers and say, for instance, they have PO, but they don't have a JJS worker, and they would be YIC. But if they have a JJS worker or a DFS worker, then we're going to put them in that category regardless of if they're non-residential or residential.
Okay, Amy says okay. So, and then another had said no on it not making sense. This is not necessarily new data, it's new to our summary form. So this is information you should be getting from the student intake form. And then I think we have somebody who's unmuted that maybe has another question.
This is LaRue. I do have a question. Could you move your screen over to the very end of the second page so that I can look at that drop down again?
Yes, absolutely. So,
hey Amanda, this is Heather Norda. I was just going to say with that JJS and DCFS and all of that, when I first came on board, I was very confused by you're just inundated with acronyms, but that information is usually on the intake form. That is something that you can find usually pretty easily. And you can always ask the caseworkers for clarification on that. But I do think I just sat and made a list of acronyms and the definitions of them when I first started and memorized what all of them meant. Because we throw that around because we assume everyone knows, but if you're new, you have no clue what all that means, you know? So that's just something that worked for me.
Thank you. I too forget that we don't all live in acronym world, and the interesting thing to me too is sometimes acronyms don't mean the same thing district by district. So that is smart to make a list for yourselves, and something I'm going to add a note for to add to information we send out to mentors.
Amanda?
Yes.
Also, just to help clarify, where it said YIC, it also notes it says YIC other, if that helps.
Yeah, let me scroll back and show that. It does on that. So, and we added that other because there will be some students in some areas, because we do have a couple mentors that are specific to student services and not necessarily specific to YIC. Let me roll back over so that everybody.
Amanda,
yes.
I'm sorry, under the service providers, what is UNI?
UNI is the University Neurological Institute, which is one of the mental health facilities.
Okay.
And I forgot to mention when I was reviewing that column, that varies area by area, district by district. Obviously, you know, if you're down in San Juan or something, you're probably not working with the University of Utah facilities. You're working with a different organization and agency. So that cell is not limited to a drop down. That is something you can actually type in whatever is appropriate for that student. And that might also be,
okay.
You know, one that you don't use as often.
Okay, Amanda, on the DHS provider, so instead of just saying YIC, we put like juvenile justice, child and family. Most of mine will fall under that, so I don't know where the YIC would come in.
So the
if you're being specific.
Okay, so the YIC/other is probably not going to get used very often by our YIC mentors specifically. That's
Okay.
for the mentors who are working with kids who are in other areas of at risk.
Oh, okay.
Like Anne said, there's a handful of kids that are transitioning out of custody, and so they're still receiving mentor services until the end of the school year. So
Oh, so on their home trial, that's what we would put them in is, no?
no, not yet, because they would,
Okay.
on home trial, they're still under DCFS's custody.
Okay.
Right, Anne?
All right.
Yes, exactly. In fact, I was telling Amanda, I so far have about 160 kids this year, and I have not used the YIC designation yet. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how we won't use that very often. It's just in those times where you go, oh my goodness, this kid isn't DCFS or JJS. What do I do with him? Well, we put him under YIC. But most of the time, we won't have to use that.
Great. Thank you. That's very clear.
Good.
And I will just add that it adds a little bit of flexibility due to the fact that there is flexibility within the YIC definition, which is that YIC students are just students receiving services from Department of Human Services. So we may be serving students who are not in custody of either of the Division of JJS or Division of Child and Family Services. You know, they may be a student who's receiving services from Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, or Division of Services of People with Disabilities, or possibly a post-adopt student that we're working with. Students that still technically qualify for YIC services, but we're not putting them as JJS or DCFS custody. We still want to account for those kids, and specifically account for those to make sure those services are effective and appropriate, as those are the ones most likely that we have other services that might be duplicate services.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, Amanda, this is LaRue again. On your credits earned prior to CNC and the credits earned while in CNC, that area, I noticed that you mentioned that junior high is not considered something that's that we need to keep track of, but in our district, junior high is 9th grade, and 9th grade would be, so instead of writing junior high for the student, would we put high school if they're a 9th grader?
You could leave it and just report the credits earned, because we will have the grade designation column, so that will, because I'm one of those kids who went to that 9th grade. So yes, you can leave them as junior high with the 9th grade designation and report those credits for them.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking questions. Okay, anything else, folks?
Hi, this is Tracy. On credits earned while in CC, those are separate from the original credits, right? They're not combined?
Well, so I do have it combined, and you know, I hadn't thought about that till you asked that question. Since this is the end of each term, we would be looking at what they have at the end of each term.
Okay, the total of credits earned.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
No, thank you for clarifying, because I think that will help others. So thank you for clarifying. And then the same with the GPA, what it was before they received any services, and then the current GPA at the end of each term. Okay. Oh, yep. Okay. So Amy was wondering the same thing. So yep. So glad you clarified that. Okay, folks, any other questions? Let's see. So should we put NA for an exit date? Yes, unless it's the last semester of, or excuse me, the term of the year, and then I want you to use the end of year exit and put your last day of school in. Otherwise, actually you would probably just, let's see. Yeah, so you would use the end of year, and it doesn't allow for an NA. So if it's, you know, second and third semester and they are still in your care, you would just leave that reason for exit blank because they're still with you. And then on the date, yes, you could list the NA because that is a cell that will let you manipulate it. It's not a drop down.
Okay, I have a question on that. We usually just call and have the district exit them out if it's in between the quarter. So do we not do that anymore? Do we finish the quarter and just fill in that exit date?
Nick, can you help me answer that one?
No, because I'm trying to multitask. What was the question again?
I was just wondering on the exit date, we usually, if they exit before the end of the quarter or, you know, 2 weeks after the quarter starts or whatever, do we still put them on our form for that quarter? We used to just call up to the district and they would delete them out of the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep them on the form with the correct exit date as close as you can.
Oh, okay. So just keep that data for the quarterly
Right.
information. Okay, great.
Yeah, we'd like to see data on every student you serve, even if it's, you know, as short as a few days. I've heard horror stories, so I feel like that's an honest statement to make, but whatever amount of time you have the student, we want to see that information. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Amanda, this is
Go ahead.
Heather Norda again. I just am wondering, do you ever pull, so I know in the Granite District, we get on, we look and make sure that the register dropped the student the same day we drop the student, so those things match. Even if it's a day off, we link them so that the data is the same for them as it is for us, so there's never a conflict that a student was there a week longer than one of us reported. Do you, I know all these districts and everything would be difficult to do, but do you link those dates up? I just wanted to point that out in case other people learning this need to make sure they just check their software to make sure what date the register dropped the student. Did that make sense?
Not necessarily. I'm going to look at Anne and Nick on this one.
Amanda, I think what Heather's referring to here is that I don't know if all districts have this ability, but we can get onto the district data collection device. We can make sure that the day they exit is the same as the day that we have them exit, so that all of our records are the same. For instance, I know some of us have had the experience, okay, I know all of us have had the experience where we go in to see a student and they're already gone, and so we don't know when they exited, right? Because last week when we went to go see them, we're here. So we just always make sure we check the big data collector that our district does to make sure that our dates line up with their dates. So we're getting all of those numbers correct so that we're not recording that we have kids longer than we actually have them. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And as far as Heather's added question about, I have not yet looked at trying to match up exit dates with kids. You know, with the transition of staff at my office, etc., the data collection has been kind of spotty. So that's the other reason we've made these changes this summer, is to improve the data collection statewide, so that, like I said, we can compare apples and apples and oranges and oranges, and that I can report those apples and oranges to the levels above me. So we might be looking at matching exit dates moving forward, but not yet.
Amanda, I have a question about the exit date. Is that the exit date? Is the exit date the day they are no longer youth in care, or is it the date you are no longer a youth in care mentor for them? The reason I ask this is because, say last year I had one student that moved from a school that I serviced to another school in the district, and so a different youth and care mentor took over.
So
So
the date would be when you stop providing services.
when I stopped providing services. Okay.
Yep, because our first row at the beginning is which mentor. So hopefully as we're seeing that student transition from you to the other mentor, we can look at those dates and see that they line up, you know, that they exited from you on one date and were assigned to a different mentor that same date.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have a comment here. Let's see.
Now I have a question on this then.
Okay.
Each one of us, we're in Weber County, and we each fill out our own individual Utah Mentor caseload summary and send it into the district. And then they're the ones that compile all the information. So I wouldn't be using the Mentor 1, Mentor 2, Mentor 3 thing over at the very first part of this form.
Right. What
Okay.
you in place is just put your name in, and then one of the fancy tricks, okay, it's not fancy, but I'm data nerding here for a moment. But in Excel, once you've put it in, if you hover at the bottom right of the cell, it will give you a plus sign, and then you can copy and paste that all the way down. So you would just be listed, if you're doing your own individual summary, just list yourself all the way down.
Okay.
And a quick way to shortcut that is just type your name in first and then grab that plus sign and drag it down.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. And then there was a private comment about students who are not necessarily withdrawn. Let's see, let me read this. So conflicts between when they're withdrawn from one district and registered into another, we know that happens. It's frustration of the data collectors statewide, you know, that sometimes kids are not exited out from one district before they move to the other. I would, if it's affecting you, I would encourage you to use the Check and Connect directory to make contact with the YIC director in the new district, or vice versa, if they're exiting from that district and you need that information to be completed in the system so that you can accept them into your system. Work with your director or YIC directors in the other districts to get those changes into the student information systems so that you can transfer students from one to the other. We did have so there was a question about some mentors in specific districts. We have had, I don't want to say significant, but a noticeable amount of turnover this summer. So one district in particular, Salt Lake City School District, does not currently have any mentors. Their director, Wendy, actually invited me to offer that information out, that they're currently looking for mentors in Salt Lake City School District. So on that private comment, unfortunately, right now, Horizonte does not have a CNC mentor. Their YIC director is pretty much on her own, but she is actively trying to recruit 3 mentors for Salt Lake City School District, and one of them would cover Horizonte. Oh, that's right. I lied. She still does have one. Annie, I'm sorry, I forgot. I get so mixed up between all the districts, so please forgive me, but I know she is actively recruiting for some folks. And then in some of the smaller districts that are not on the Wasatch Front, like up in Cache, they have one mentor and that person's a new mentor. So they're going to need some time to get trained and you know, learn the ropes. So you might need to reach out to the YIC director specifically. But I am going to post the updated directory by the end of this week as well. And that is on the Youth and Care page of the Utah State Board of Education website. And I will include that in our follow-up email so that you guys have that again this year. It's got all the recordings from last year, and then we'll have today's once I get it all squared away. So if any of your counterparts weren't able to participate today, they'll be able to watch today's recording. And then always you can contact me If you're having issues with connections or you don't know where to look for information, you're welcome to contact me at any time about mentoring. And I'll do my best to make that connection or help you find the information. Email's great. Phone's 801-538-7711. I am currently answering over my laptop, which is an interesting experience. But I do have phone capability even while I'm working from home. So contact if you have questions or you want to ask, more detail on the spreadsheets, or even have a private session where we go through and have you fill it in while I'm there to coach you through it. So any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat or anybody unmute. So why it get to be as fun as I'd hoped, but it looks like we do get to end a couple minutes early. And I, at this point in life, will celebrate those couple of minutes because 2020 has taught me that life continues to march on whether I'm ready or not. So thank you so much for your participation today. It's so nice to see some of your faces and read comments and hear voices. I have missed you guys this summer. Welcome to our new mentors. You're in an amazing group of educators and humans. Reach out to one another, collaborate, register for the training if you need to, shoot me an email. Something I forgot to mention at the beginning is a couple of us host a Facebook group that's closed for our Utah mentors. And that's another way we're trying to collaborate, but it's obviously optional. You're welcome to just email each other, whatever we need to do to connect. So I appreciate everybody so much. And yes, this has been recorded. My little recording light is flashing, so everything should have gone well. And once I get it converted to a YouTube, I will get it posted on the mentoring page on the USBE website, and I will share that out with the follow-up email as well.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you. Jeff, what's the
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Awesome as always.
Jeff, if you could post the Facebook group name or share it out. I'm having a duh moment here. There's the link. So the link to the Facebook group is in the chat if anybody wants to come join us. I feel like me and Jeff and the other trainers just talk to each other, so we would love to have more of you come play with us and share information or ask questions, of course, keeping our student privacy in mind. So use I think Johnny's the name Ann likes to use, make it nice and general, or let's have private conversations if necessary. Thank you all so much. I appreciate all of you and look forward to our next webinar, which I've sent it out, but I'll send you out another reminder and a link to that one as we get